It's mid-August now, and anyone who watches hurricane season knows that this is a time of year that things really start to heat up. When I made my last video about hurricanes at the beginning of July, all signs pointed toward the Atlantic having another above average hurricane season, and the Eastern Pacific having a below normal season. Let's just say that since then, the tables have turned a bit. Now, before we get into what's happened in the last month and a half, and what it means for the remainder of hurricane season, I would appreciate like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to stay tuned for future content. Okay, so what's happened in the past 6 weeks? Well, it depends on the basin you're talking about. Let's start with the Atlantic, since that's what most people are familiar with. After Hurricane Elsa hit Florida's Gulf Coast and dissipated, the Atlantic has been in a huge activity slump. Between July 10th and August 10th, there were no new storms in the entire basin, the first time that's happened since 2009. This is somewhat typical. Late July is known for having lower amounts of activity compared to other times of year. In this case, the main thing that was impeding development is a Saharan air layer. You see, the trade winds that blow in the eastern Atlantic often blow out a huge plume of dust from the Sahara Desert westward across the ocean. This tends to limit tropical development, since the dust results in drier air that makes it harder for storms to form. Way back in June of 2020, I made a video about a record-breaking Saharan air layer that caused cars to have layers of dust on them in Puerto Rico, and it even made skies hazy as far west as Texas. While the Saharan dust plumes this year haven't even approached the same level as last year, it was enough to keep the Atlantic dead quiet for a month. Recently, though, the dust has dissipated a bit, allowing two new tropical storms to form, Fred and Grace. Fred really hasn't gained any traction, with it being a disorganized tropical depression north of Cuba, and it's expected to make landfall on Florida's Gulf Coast as a tropical storm. Grace is a bit further east, but when all is said and done, it's expected to take a very similar track to Fred. But what about the Eastern Pacific? Well, while the Atlantic has slumbered, the EPAC has been in an absolute frenzy of activity. Ever since I made my last video, a stunning 7 named storms have formed in the basin, with 3 of them being hurricanes and 2 of them being major hurricanes. The latest named storm, Linda, has rapidly intensified over the past 24 hours, and as of the writing of this script, is on the verge of attaining Category 4 intensity. The other major hurricane, Felicia, was a major hurricane for a very long time during mid-July, and it peaked with winds of 145 miles per hour. Thankfully, every single one of these storms have been so-called fish storms that stay out to sea and never hit land. Nonetheless, this latest spur of activity has been nothing short of impressive, and it brings the basin up to 12 named storms so far, just 3 short of the average for an entire season. It even hits the lower end of NOAA's forecast for the season of 12 to 18 named storms, which was made at the end of May, and it's only August. Because of this latest activity frenzy, it is almost guaranteed at this point that the EPAC sees an above average season, and if that ends up being the case, it would end up contradicting nearly every forecast made for this season, something that I've never seen before. But what about the Atlantic? Would it also defy the calculated predictions of multiple institutions and hundreds of meteorologists and have a below average season? Probably not. As mentioned before, it's pretty normal for the Atlantic to have a slow period in July and early August. However, that slow period is coming to a close, and with the peak of hurricane season just a matter of weeks away, it's only a matter of time before the Atlantic has its own activity frenzy. Until then, if you live in a hurricane-prone area on the US or Mexican coast, it's always good to have a preparedness plan in place, whether that means evacuating or hoarding as much food as you can and hiding in the basement. Either works. And that wraps up this update video on hurricane season. If there is a notable hurricane that poses a threat to land, whether it be in the Atlantic or Eastern Pacific, you can expect me to cease all other video production and spend a few days just making updates on that particular storm. That way, I can give you guys new information on forecast tracks, impacts, and intensity without you guys having to delve into the mess that is mainstream media. Until then, I would appreciate like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to stay tuned for future content. Thanks, and have a great rest of your day.